Good morning again. I'm dealing with some people at the moment who are suffering fear, panic attacks, depressions, trying to deal with things that inhibit their health in their life and mental health, and are wrapped up and involved in things that are fearful. And I try to help in the best way I can. And I understand what it's like for somebody who's in a depressive phase, for example, to get advice from the outside, because in a depressive phase, all advice from the outside seems pointless, meaningless, trite, etc. In fact, all advice, when you're in the position of the person receiving the advice, especially in situations where you're uneasy anyway, and in a state of fear or panic, or all advice seems trite. So I have people around me who are dealing with fear, and possibly all fear at the end. One of the people I was talking to, I said, are all those fears, though, when you think about the fears, because she has many, are they all separate fears? Are they the fear of this, the fear of failing, the fear of being alone, the fear of, I don't know, whatever? Or are they all connected? Is it really just one fear? In fact, is it not the case that the only fear is fear itself? The only fear is fear itself. Check out your own backyard before you check out someone else. That the only fear is fear itself. And that's it. Fear has one face. It's fear. She tried to confront her fear in one sort of episode recently, and sort of tried to confront it in form of, well, I suppose sort of like anger in a way, but I don't think that was, well, I don't know if that was very helpful. Maybe it was for her. In any case, my better idea, I thought, was to place the fear in the position it deserves to be in, which is as an entity in an otherwise fearless space. So let me just explain that. I think all fear is potentially one fear, the deep-seated, reptilian, primitive, deepest part of our brain, Turing brain fear of death. Anything that challenges me in any way, shape or form is challenging my existence. Primitive reptilian reactions to any danger. In first reaction, fear, and then we become more complex as human beings and cover those fears up with cover that reaction up with our ability to think and reason and so on and so forth, but the reaction is still there, and it's still a primitive reaction to fear with fight or flight, because fear, the impending doom means potential death. So all fear is a fear of death, possibly, which I'll come back to in a bit. So me doing and being interested in hypnosis and NLP as well, we sort of went through hypnotic mind experiments, visual imagery, things you can use to possibly deal better with overwhelming emotions of things like fear as well. So in NLP there are things like, and hypnosis, things like giving your fear a representation. For example, maybe a huge ball that you have to carry. Ooh, your massive ball. That's a drudge, something that you have to drag around with you. And then with a horrible colour, for example, a fearful colour, a fear-filled colour, something that you don't like, and then you gradually make the ball smaller and smaller in your mind, and change the colour to something more pleasant, maybe a sort of glowing gold or whatever, until the ball's so small that you can fit it in your pocket, kind of thing. So you literally reduce the fear in your mind in the form of a visualization under hypnosis. So we've done that kind of thing. And another example was to imagine, let's say you've got three emotions like fear, or fear of failing, fear of social situations, and something else. Those three balls, imagine them in a space, and then you go into each ball and you experience the fear of that thing, picture that happening in its worst possible case, and how you physically react to that fear. And then you go to the next one, and then you go into the next one, experience that one, and then you come out and realize that those three balls, those three glowing orbs, if you like, are in a space. And now ignore the balls and examine the space. Because the person's been fixated on the fear, which is represented by the ball, and not paid any attention to the space around that. And the space around them is just space, where there is no fear, because you can see the fear represented in the space. So the space cannot be the fear. So the space is something else. What is the space? These are sort of interesting ways to deal with the way you think about things. Ultimately, what I wanted to come to at the end was this thing about fear generally, because that's the thing that's surrounded me at the moment with other people. It seems to always be about fear, panic attacks, fear. And the idea that ultimately all fear is a fear of death. And it seems to me that there are three possibilities here if you fear death. Possibility number one, your brain dies, everything goes black, and that was it. If that's the case, you won't know. You'll have the last moments of death. Then your brain will die. And then you will have no recollection of ever having been. Which seems to be perfectly safe to me. As soon as you've entered that phase, all problems are solved because there will be no memory of anything else. Situation number 2 is your brain dies and you carry on into something else, meaning consciousness detaches from the brain and continues on, and there are natural and there's a natural system that is followed, progression, just like here, birth, child grows up, learns to walk, etc, etc, etc. There will be a natural progression, obviously then not the end, and there will be a natural progression to what comes afterwards, which means it's all natural and perfectly okay, so nothing to worry about there either. Possibility number 3 is that it's limited, so you die, consciousness detaches from the physical presence and lingers for a unspecified time and then dissipates, decoheres, if you like, in the same way that an entangled system can decohere in quantum physics. So the information is held for a unspecified amount of time until it decoheres into its environment. Nothing to worry about there then, because as with situation number 2, it'll either be it will be a natural progression to there, and as with situation number 1, after the point of decoherence, there will be nothing like a memory to recall anything at all. It seems as well that our definition of death at the moment is not good. We need a new one. If you're not aware, there have been studies by Sam Parnia, the AWARE study, 5 years, I think, of he's a cardiologist, 5 years of near-death experience cases being studied. All in all, 20% of cardiac patients, I think it was, check me on that, I'm not sure, having had a near-death experience. Lots of people are going to be thinking, yeah, near-death experience, oh, a load of twaddle, man, as I used to. And then there's Pim van Lommel, ridiculous name, an excellent chap though, also a cardiologist in the Netherlands, also written a book about his studies, and there are cases amongst these studies where it will have been impossible for that person at that time to have had that experience. So, for example, Pim van Lommel gives the example of a man born blind, or a patient born blind, no visual representations ever in his entire life, has a near-death experience and leaves the body and sees himself from different positions in the room, never having a visual experience in his entire life. Now he has a visual experience of the world after his death, or in a period where he is, to all intents and purposes, this is why we need a new definition, to all intents and purposes, dead. And including the usual near-death experience cases of people who have heard things going on in and around them in the hospital at the time, where they could not possibly have been witness to that They couldn't have seen anything because their eyes were taped closed, as they often are when it comes to a cardiac arrest or certain operations. Or their ears were stopped closed, so they couldn't possibly have heard anything, etc., etc., etc. There are enough cases, enough anomaly cases, to be able to say, hang on a minute, something's not right here. And enough doubt then to have to redefine what we mean by death. It's certainly not a flatlined brain state. Brain flatlines out, there is no activity in the brain, no activity in the heart anymore. That's not enough, because there seems to be conscious awareness afterwards. The question is, how long does that go on for? Does it decohere after a unspecific amount of time? Does it continue on endlessly? So at some point there will be a dead point where there is literal death, no more memory, end of everything, or a continuation, both of which seem to me to be nothing to be fearful of. It's often the transition to death that we have a problem with. Don't want any pain, regrets, fear, etc., etc. There are different things that we can deal with now on the way there, and hopefully at the time. But what comes afterwards seems to me, well, as Ram Dass, Richard Alpert, said once, he claimed to have a spirit guide. I'm not sure about that, but he claimed to have a spirit guide. And he was questioning his spirit guide about death, and his spirit guide said, Ram Dass, don't worry about death. Death is perfectly safe. So, what is the point in this video? The point in this video is that there are ways to deal with fear. All fears seem to be deep-seated fears of my existence is threatened. So fears of death. Might not be literally my existence is threatened. Ooh, if I don't win the lottery, I am going to die. But it's a fear of some kind of existential threat. Wrongly interpreted, possibly, but deep-seated fears of death, of existence, existential death, threats. There are ways to deal with those things, but existence is all we know. We have no experience of anything but the thing that we experience, which is existence. And so obviously the unimaginable lack of existence, a time when there would be no existence, is fearful for us. We would rather live with the ills we know than fly to those we know not of, as Shakespeare said. So it's the fear of the unknown. This is all I know. And it's quite beautiful. And I quite like it, actually. And it'd be a shame to let it go, and that's fearful. But let it go we must, in one way or another. But it's either we let it go completely and it goes completely and that was the end, or we let it go and we receive, we continue on to something else instead, which might be equally as beautiful as this. By all accounts, lots of the descriptions of the afterlife in near-death experience patients describe many things, but they often describe a sense of beauty, peace, unconditional love, etc. So possibly there's not much to worry about. There isn't much to worry about anyway, because one way or the other, either it's a natural continuum, which will be as it will be, and therefore nothing to fear, or you will have no memory of being at all, and therefore there will be no state of fear. So, again, trite as it may appear, don't be scared. Try and... The Buddhists say die every day, so try and prepare yourself for your deathbed now. Have no regrets if you possibly can. Clear things up before you go, etc., etc., etc. And fear not the moment after, because that will be what it will be. And trite as that may seem, that seems to me to be the best way to deal with it. Try not to be fearful. Examine the fear. Examine where the fear is. And examine the space around the fear. Where it arises in your mind. In awareness. Examine that space as opposed to focusing all your attention on the fear itself. Have a wonderful Sunday, and do something nice. Be nice to people if you can, and be nice to yourself, more importantly, or just as importantly.